Late at night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through my phone and stumbled upon a post. The author of the post was none other than my husband, Fang Jiannan. My wife had a miscarriage and is now infertile. Should I listen to my mother and find another woman to bear me a son? Beneath the post was a cascade of outraged comments. If you were the one who couldn't have children, would your wife say such a thing? I'm a lawyer. Please give me your wife's contact information. I'll help her file for divorce. Is there anyone in the same city who can beat this guy up? Even as a man, I can't stand this. Someone asked, aren't you afraid your wife will see this and divorce you? To which Fang Jiannan replied, she hasn't worked since graduating. We have a daughter, and she can't leave me. I glanced at our sleeping daughter beside me and quietly enrolled in a civil service exam prep course, paying 980 yuan for it. The next morning, I silently threw the leftover food from the previous night into the trash. Ignoring the pain in my stomach, I opened the fridge to take out the chicken my mother had sent me, planning to make a nourishing soup. But before I could even place the chicken in the pot, my mother-in-law grabbed it from me. What are you doing? Didn't I leave food for you? This chicken is for Fang Jiannan when he comes back. You can't be that greedy. Can you? Her voice was dripping with disdain as she placed the chicken back in the fridge. I clenched my fists, swallowing my anger. Mother, I had surgery just a week ago. I'm still in confinement. I need proper nutrition. What's wrong with that? Half a year ago, under the relentless pressure from my mother-in-law, I finally gave in and got pregnant for the second time. Despite the fact that our daughter, Xiao Yu, was only 4 and still needed me. Fang Jiannan, overwhelmed by his job, worried he couldn't take care of me properly and brought his mother from the countryside to help. This pregnancy was brutal. The morning sickness was so severe I vomited everything I ate. Eventually, I even started vomiting blood and had to be hospitalized to protect the baby. Despite all my precautions, the baby was born prematurely at 26 weeks and didn't survive. I also lost my uterus due to hemorrhaging, and I would never be able to have children again. When my mother-in-law heard me talk back, her face darkened. It was just a miscarriage. What's the big deal? Back in my day, I had an abortion by myself, came home, and still cooked and cleaned for the whole family. Stop acting so delicate. With that, she turned back to her phone on the couch. My fury left me speechless. I returned to my room and texted Fang Jiannan, your mother didn't cook again today. His response came swiftly, isn't there some leftover food from yesterday? Please try to understand, she's not feeling well either. Just heat it up. I'm in a meeting, can't talk. I stared at my phone, trembling with rage. If it hadn't been for my mother-in-law, my baby would have survived. She came under the guise of caring for me, but it felt more like torment. Every night, I stayed up caring for Xiao Yu. Unable to sleep, I'd asked my mother-in-law not to wake me early since Fang Jiannan would take our daughter to school. But, without fail, every morning at 6:30, she'd knock on my door, insisting I wake up to have breakfast and prepare to take Xiao Yu to school. I was exasperated. Mother, I've told you, I don't eat breakfast. Fang Jiannan will take Xiao Yu. Oh please, Fang Jiannan works hard all day. You're just a housewife with nothing to do. Getting up early is good for your health. When you had Xiao Yu, I told you to exercise more, but you didn't listen. That's why you ended up having a C-section, wasting so much money. During my first pregnancy, the doctor had warned me I had a short cervix and needed complete bed rest. Yet, my mother-in-law never stopped nagging, much like she did now. At 26 weeks, I was at a prenatal checkup when I received a call from Xiao Yu's teacher, saying she had a fever. Fang Jiannan was out of town for 2 days, so I called my mother-in-law, asking her to pick up Xiao Yu and take her to the doctor. She agreed readily enough, but when I got home, she was still lounging on the couch, eyes glued to her phone. I asked where Xiao Yu was, and she sheepishly glanced at me, claiming she'd forgotten. I didn't bother arguing. I rushed to the school, and as I left, she yelled, "What's the big deal? It's just a kid. What's so important?" When I arrived, Xiao Yu's fever had spiked to 40 degrees Celsius, and she was unconscious. At 26 weeks pregnant, I could barely carry her. I had no choice but to call my mother-in-law again, pleading softly, "Mother, Xiao Yu has a high fever and needs to go to the hospital. I can't manage on my own. Can you help?" Her response was a mocking laugh. "Oh, so now you want my help? My migraine's acting up. I need to rest." Then she hung up. I called Fang Jiannan. His voice was strained. "Sweetheart, I'm out of town. I can't come back right now. You know how hard my mom works helping with Xiao Yu. You shouldn't get mad at her. And now you've got no one to help you. Get lost. I screamed and hung up. People around me stared, but I ignored them, tears streaming down my face as I carried Xiao Yu to the hospital. After a battery of tests, the doctor told me Xiao Yu had contracted hand, foot, and mouth disease and needed to be admitted. I remembered my mother-in-law's friend's grandchild, who often played with Xiao Yu, had also been sick with the same illness. I had warned my mother-in-law to keep them apart, but it seemed she had disregarded my instructions. Hours later, after finally completing the admission process, I watched my daughter, her face flushed with fever, and my heart ached. The woman in the next bed, seeing my pregnant belly, asked, "You're that far along and still taking care of your daughter by yourself?" I took a deep breath and replied, "My husband is on a business trip." Before I could finish, my belly suddenly cramped, and I felt an odd sensation. My water had broken. The kind woman called the doctors, and they rushed me to surgery. She even stayed behind to watch over Xiao Yu. As for my mother-in-law, it took over a dozen calls from the nurses before she finally answered her phone. By the time I emerged from surgery, my baby was gone. It had been a boy. The doctor said the baby was small and premature, and he had passed away within 10 minutes of birth, and I had lost my uterus. When Zhang Jian arrived, he angrily confronted his mother. "Why did you have to make things so difficult for Zhang Lai? I told you, she's pregnant. Couldn't you wait until after the baby was born?" My mother-in-law's lips quivered. How was I supposed to know she was so weak? When I was pregnant with you, I worked in the fields every day. I told her, exercise is good for pregnancy. The doctor couldn't hold back and snapped. Your daughter-in-law has a short cervix. She needed complete bed rest. How could you make her exercise? Do you know anything at all? I glared at my mother-in-law, seething with hatred. She had killed my baby. After being discharged, my mother sent over a dozen chickens, instructing my mother-in-law to make me chicken soup every day. But every day, it was boiled vegetables and leftovers. The good food was saved for Zhang Jian. That evening, when Zhang Jian returned with Xiao Yu, seeing her sweet little face was the only comfort I had left. At least I still had my daughter. That night, after putting Xiao Yu to bed, I decided to have a serious talk with Zhang Jian. Since my miscarriage, Zhang Jian and I had been sleeping in separate rooms. My mother-in-law had said that men shouldn't share a bed with a woman who had miscarried, as it brought bad luck. As for Xiao Yu, my mother-in-law insisted that since the child clung to me, and Zhang Jian had work to do, I should be the one to take care of her. I quietly opened Zhang Jian's bedroom door to find him already asleep. I nudged him gently. "Zhang Jian, wake up. We need to talk," he groaned, turning over with a look of irritation. "What are you doing? It's the middle of the night. Can't it wait till tomorrow? If you can't sleep, don't drag me into it." With that, he rolled over and went back to sleep like a pig. The words I'd wanted to say stuck in my throat, like the resentment choking me now. Neither swallowed nor expelled. The look in Zhang Jian's eyes, the tone of his voice, it was as if I were his sworn enemy. For the first time, I realized my initial choice had been a mistake. I had married far from home, my family 1,000 miles away. Back then, my parents hadn't wanted me to marry Zhang Jian. My mother had cried, "You're going so far away. If you're bullied, no one will be there to help." I had reassured her, saying that Zhang Jian treated me well, and his mother had promised to treat me like her own daughter. My mother had looked at me like I was a fool. On the day I left with Zhang Jian, my father was so angry he refused to see me off, locking himself in his room. My mother, however, had quietly slipped me a bank card while we waited for the car. She said it was the dowry she and my father had saved over the years, warning me not to let Zhang Jian know about it. Men's kindness can't be trusted, she had said. Only money in your hands is reliable. But at the time, still blinded by love, I believed in the supremacy of romance. How could I have understood the cold truth she spoke? After we married, Zhang Jian and I were both accepted into a prestigious master's program. But I became pregnant with Xiao Yu. Zhang Jian had assured me he would take care of everything, and I should focus on the baby. So, I gave up my studies. After Xiao Yu was born, I wanted to return to work. But Zhang Jian said our daughter needed me. So I continued as a housewife, losing all connection to the outside world. For years, I had sacrificed for Zhang Jian and our family. I didn't even have a single friend. Meanwhile, Zhang Jian's career flourished, his social circle grew, and the gap between us widened. Long, lonely nights stretched ahead of me, and I poured my frustrations into the digital void. Unable to sleep, I scrolled through my phone. The algorithm, always perceptive, fed me stories of domestic life. And then, one post caught my eye. My wife had a miscarriage and is now infertile. Should I listen to my mother and find another woman to bear me a son? The comments were brutal. Someone asked, "Aren't you afraid your wife will see this and divorce you?" Zhang Jian's reply was chilling. "She's a housewife. We have a daughter. She won't leave me." Another commenter mocked, "So, you want to wave the victory flag outside while keeping the peace at home?" Huh? My hand shook as I opened the poster's profile picture. Beneath the glow of the setting sun, two hands were tightly clasped together. A cold sweat broke out all over me, and I couldn't stop trembling. It was Zhang Jian. The picture had been taken the day we received our marriage certificate. Back then, he had held my hand tightly and told me, "I've finally married you. You've sacrificed so much for me, and I'll treat you well for the rest of my life." That photo had been our shared profile picture on all our social media accounts. It had never changed. I wrapped my arms around myself, biting my lip to keep from crying out. Zhang Jian was despicable, but he was right. I had no job, no income. Even if I divorced him, custody of Xiao Yu would not go to me. He knew I loved Xiao Yu more than my own life, and he had me cornered. Even if he fathered children with another woman, I would be powerless. Steadying myself, I looked at Xiao Yu, still fast asleep, and opened the civil service exam website, carefully selecting the position that best suited me. Women are inherently vulnerable, but for their children, they become strong. I had to keep Xiao Yu with me, but that didn't mean I would let this wretched family off so easily. The damp breath on my face made me nauseous. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry for raising my voice last night. You know how busy I've been lately. Don't worry, from now on, I'll take Xiao Yu to school. I've already talked to my mother, and she'll pick her up every day. You just focus on getting better." He kissed my cheek as he spoke. Once he left, I scrubbed my face vigorously with a tissue. From that day on, I no longer woke up early. I locked my door, put on my headphones, and focused on studying, ignoring my mother-in-law's persistent banging outside. I had also purchased hidden cameras and a voice recorder online, waiting for moments when both Zhang Jian and my mother-in-law were out of the house so I could secretly install them throughout the house and in the car. There's an old saying, kindness should never be forgotten, but neither should caution. My mother-in-law no longer cooked or cleaned for me, but I made sure not to let myself suffer. If she didn't cook for me, I simply ordered takeout. What a waste of a daughter-in-law, lying around the house all day, eating up all my son's money. She ranted. I responded calmly, "Mother, you should remember it was your son who begged me to be a stay-at-home wife. So what if I eat takeout twice a day? If my husband's money isn't spent on me, who should it be spent on? Or are we saving it so he can give it to some woman outside?" My mother-in-law had once been a housewife herself, caring for Zhang Jian, nursing her paralyzed mother-in-law, and tending to her perfectly healthy but useless husband, who never lifted a finger at home. Her husband controlled the family finances, and every penny spent had to be reported. Even when her own parents visited and stayed for a meal, he would beat her for the extra expense. She had struggled to raise her son, finally said goodbye to her bedridden mother-in-law, and transformed from a frail young woman into a withered old lady. She thought her hardships were over, only to discover that her husband had taken up with a woman 20 years younger. Within a few short years, he had squandered their family fortune and moved in with his mistress. Initially, my mother-in-law caused a ruckus, then humbled herself, begging her husband to cut ties with the woman and return home, promising she would forgive him and not file for divorce. But the very next day, he dragged her to the civil office, filed for divorce, and married his mistress that same day. Looking back, I once pitied her for what my father-in-law had done. But now I see I should have reserved that pity for myself. My words, both implied and explicit, left her speechless, her face alternating between pale white and flushed red. "You shameless woman, raised without proper parents. At least I have my son to support me. But you can't even bear a son. Soon enough, I'll have him throw you out." So, she finally couldn't hold back the truth. I stared at her unblinkingly. "What are you looking at?" she muttered. "Is that why you've been telling your son to find another woman to bear him a son?" This is the first time I've ever seen a mother become a matchmaker for her own son. How enlightening. My words drove her into a frenzy. "Who said you could sit there and do nothing? Just wait. If you beg me, I might let Zhang Jian's future son call you mother." I smirked. "So, You're suggesting I raise an illegitimate child? The phrase illegitimate child hit her like a dagger, and she clutched her chest, screaming that I was trying to kill her with my insolence. Late that night, Zhang Jian returned from one of his business dinners. As soon as he stepped through the door, my mother-in-law rushed out to meet him, and the two of them talked for a while. Then I heard Zhang Jian's voice rise. She's my mother. No one, not even Zhang Lai, gets to disrespect her. Moments later, the door to my room slammed open with a loud bang. Xiao Yu, who had been sleeping soundly, woke up in fright, and I hurried to comfort her. Furious, I shouted, Zhang Jian, are you crazy? He ignored whether or not our daughter had been woken up and stormed over to yank me out of bed. Completely unprepared, I was thrown to the ground, my back hitting the corner of the bed, and I let out a pained groan. Zhang Lai, I've told you my mother isn't in good health. Why do you insist on provoking her? His hands dug into my shoulders, his face full of the same contempt as before. The stench of alcohol and perfume assaulted my senses. Struggling, I pushed his hands away. Your mother isn't in good health? Then how does she manage to shop, play mahjong, and dance every day? The other day, Xiao Yu had a fever, and I couldn't leave, so I asked her to pick her up. But she sat at home on her phone. Even after I begged her, she still refused to help. Our child is dead because of her. Don't you understand? It was just an accident. Everyone was upset, especially my mother, and she's already apologized. What more do you want? Are you going to hold a grudge forever? I stared at him, incredulous. And what about your mother telling you to find someone else to bear you a son? Our son had just died. She just really wants a grandson, he replied, still defending himself. Our argument escalated to the point that Xiao Yu woke up, seeing her father pinning me to the floor. Not understanding what was happening, she cried out, Mommy, I want Mommy. I tried to calm her down, reaching for her. Zhang Jian, Xiao Yu's awake. Let's not do this in front of her, please? But he pushed me down again, and in the corner of my eye, I saw my mother-in-law standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching with a smug expression. Son, she said, I told you, this woman needs to be put in her place. She's dared to walk all over me, so teach her a lesson. Then she picked up Xiao Yu, locked the door, and walked out, ignoring her granddaughter's terrified cries. Outside, Xiao Yu wailed, Mommy, I want Mommy, don't leave me here, Mommy. And through the door, I heard her say, Daddy, please don't hit Mommy, I want my Mommy. Inside, my heart felt as if it were being torn apart. I pleaded with Zhang Jian, who had lost all reason. Please, let me go. Xiao Yu is scared. I need to hold her. Please. Ignoring my pleas and Xiao Yu's cries, he slapped me twice, hard, and then grabbed me by the hair like a rag doll, forcing me to my feet. Will you ever disrespect my mother again? I realized that against brute force, resistance was useless, so I nodded frantically. My mother-in-law opened the door, glanced at me, and pulled Zhang Jian away. That's enough, son. Don't kill her. A lesson is all she needs. Xiao Yu ran over to me, crying, Mommy, wake up. I'll blow on you to make it better. Mommy's fine, sweetheart. Mommy's not hurt. I was just playing with Daddy. Let's get ready for bed, and I'll tell you a story about your favorite polar bear. Okay? Okay. I wiped my tears, gently cleaned Xiao Yu's face, and, gritting my teeth through the pain, held her close until she fell asleep. Only after she was soundly asleep did I have time to collect the shattered pieces of myself. Looking in the mirror, my face was swollen like a pig's head. Bruises covered me, and blood dripped from my mouth, mocking the foolish girl who had once chosen to marry Zhang Jian so resolutely. They say domestic violence only happens once, or it happens endlessly. The Zhang Lai of the past would have said, Zhang Jian, if you ever hit me, I'll cut you with a knife. But now, I had no family to rely on, no financial independence to protect myself, so all I could do was endure. So, the next morning, when Zhang Jian apologized, I chose to forgive him. He looked at my swollen face with a hint of guilt in his eyes. Sweetheart, I'm sorry, I drank too much last night. I swear it'll never happen again. It's the weekend, to make it up to you and Xiao Yu. I'll spend the whole day at home with you too. Okay? He leaned down to kiss Xiao Yu's cheek, but she recoiled. His hand awkwardly brushed her hair. Xiao Yu, Mommy and Daddy were just playing a game last night. Right, Mommy? I smiled weakly. That's right, Xiao Yu. How about spending the day with Daddy? Ignoring Zhang Jian, I focused on comforting Xiao Yu. My mother-in-law glared at me, slamming her bowl down on the table. Zhang Lai, when couples fight, they always make up. Zhang Jian apologized. Don't make a big deal out of it. Every daughter-in-law gets scolded by her mother-in-law. But only you act like it's the end of the world. I forced down another bite of food. Fighting the nausea, I made up an excuse about needing to go for a post-surgery checkup and told Zhang Jian to take Xiao Yu to the amusement park. Xiao Yu had been waiting for this trip for months. And as soon as she heard, she forgot all about the night before and happily went with him. That evening, Zhang Jian approached me with a box in his hand. He opened it to reveal a gold bracelet. When we first got married, we'd spent all our savings on buying a house. We didn't have a wedding banquet. No dowry, no gold jewelry. Whenever we passed a jewelry store, I'd stand by the window, admiring the displays. Zhang Jian had promised, one day, I'll buy you something nice. I just got a bonus. Enough to get you something. I'd waved it off, telling him we had more important things to spend money on. He had cupped my face like I was the most precious thing in the world, swearing he'd give me a good life. Now, I finally had a gold bracelet. But it had become a tool for Zhang Jian to apologize for his abuse. Sweetheart, didn't you always want a bracelet? I saw this while shopping with Xiao Yu and thought it would suit you. He looked at me with contrition in his eyes. But I merely glanced at the bracelet in my hand, expressionless. Seeing no reaction from me, he awkwardly turned off the lights and climbed into bed. His hand slowly crept across my back, inching its way forward. It's been a while, hasn't it, sweetheart? Startled, I pushed his hand away. Not tonight, I had a doctor's appointment today. He pulled his hand back. Annoyed, fine, take care of yourself. Get some sleep. Since the miscarriage, we hadn't shared a bed. While reviewing footage from the hidden camera in his room, I overheard him telling a friend, ever since she lost her uterus, I haven't felt anything for her. Man, she doesn't even feel like a woman anymore. I tried, but it didn't work. Still, those girls who haven't had kids yet, now there's something. Last time was great. Next time's on me, okay? He was disgusted by me. I was more disgusted by him. The mere thought of touching him made me fear I'd contract HPV. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in studying, determined to pass the civil service exam. If it didn't kill me, I'd study until I dropped. After clearing the written exam, the interview, and the health check, I finally received my official appointment. That was when I allowed myself to breathe a sigh of relief. My mother-in-law continued her ridicule, lying around all day. Not a spark of life left in you. How unlucky. Zhang Jian had lost all interest in me. But his affairs continued unabated. Thanks to the hidden cameras and recorders, I knew every step he took, who he slept with, where he went. It was all laid out before me. During this time, I played the role of the obedient wife, picking up and dropping off Xiao Yu, doing laundry, cooking. No matter how much my mother-in-law provoked me, I didn't react. Zhang Jian, satisfied with my behavior, became even more brazen in his actions. Not long after, I received a call informing me of my final appointment inspection, and that government officials would visit my home on Saturday. I told Zhang Jian and my mother-in-law that I had invited some friends over and needed to prepare. My mother-in-law scoffed. Friends? When have you ever had friends? You never leave the house. Her eyes were filled with disdain. Zhang Jian, pleased with my recent behavior, readily agreed. The next day, just as promised, the inspection team arrived. Zhang Jian opened the door, freezing in shock when he saw who stood there. His expression, as if he had swallowed something foul, filled me with quiet satisfaction. Director 2? What brings you here? Director 2 was Zhang Jian's immediate supervisor. Equally surprised, Director 2 asked, Xiao Zhang, what are you doing here? Is this Zhang Lai's home? I stepped forward calmly, pushing my stunned mother-in-law aside. Director 2, yes, this is my home. Zhang Jian is my husband. I invited them all inside. Director 2 flipped open his notebook, glancing curiously at Zhang Jian. Didn't your wife tell you she was applying for the civil service? I smiled sweetly. I wanted it to be a surprise. Zhang Jian, do you like this surprise? I bet you never imagined that the wife you've despised for so long, the stay-at-home mom you belittled, would pass the exam and now work for the same department as you. And not only that, but one day, you might even find yourself being supervised by her. Zhang Jian's chapped lips trembled as he nodded repeatedly. Yes, yes. Director 2. He exchanged a glance with my mother-in-law, who finally seemed to snap out of her daze, rushing into the kitchen to prepare the fruits I had bought the day before. Even after Director Tu and the others left, neither Zhang Jian nor my mother-in-law had recovered their composure. Watching their pale faces filled me with a deep sense of satisfaction. The words of Director Tu still echoed in my ears. Xiao Zhang, your wife is impressive, taking care of a child while passing one of the most competitive exams. You should treat her well. And remember, now that she works for our department, you'll need to set a good example. My mother-in-law and Zhang Jian sat silently on the couch, glaring at me. Zhang Jian was the first to speak. Sweetheart, when did you apply for the civil service? Why didn't you tell me? I feigned innocence. I told you, it was supposed to be a surprise. Now that I'll be working, we'll have more income. Isn't that a good thing? I winked playfully at him. Besides, mother's always complaining that I just sit at home spending your money. Now that I have a steady job like yours, aren't you happy? Zhang Jian stammered. That's not what I meant. Why did you have to apply to my department? You know Director Tu comes by often to check on us. I cut him off. Isn't it better for you if I work there? I did it all for you. Darling. Zhang Jian opened his mouth to protest but quickly realized that everything I said made sense. As I headed to my room, I heard my mother-in-law muttering. When did she become so cunning? You'd better keep a close eye on her. Don't let her betray you. After passing my final evaluation, I quickly completed the paperwork to start my new job. My colleagues were all kind, and I soon adjusted to life as a working woman. Not long after, to express my gratitude for their support, I invited my colleagues over for dinner. Little did I know this would spark a scandal. As soon as we entered the house, strange noises emanated from the bedroom. My face turned pale, and my colleagues, far from naive, immediately understood what was happening. I rushed into the bedroom, throwing open the door with lightning speed. My curious colleagues followed closely behind. There, tangled together on my bed, were two naked bodies. Zhang Jian hadn't even realized what was happening. By the time he did, it was too late. His mistress shrieked, trying to cover herself. Zhang Jian grabbed the bedsheet, wrapping it around himself, and when he saw me, instead of showing remorse, he shouted, Zhang Lai, why did you bring all these people here? He even had the audacity to pick up a nearby ashtray and hurl it at me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for impact, but a male colleague intercepted it just in time. I collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Darling, I'm sorry, please don't hit me again. I didn't know you'd bring someone home today. I swear I wouldn't have come back if I'd known. My colleagues stared at me in shock, unsure of how much they had pieced together from my pitiful words. A female colleague, filled with righteous anger, asked, Zhang Lai, what do you mean by this? Has your husband done this often? Still crying, I shook my head. No, it's not like that. It's because I can't have children anymore. My husband lost interest in me, so he sought someone else. He doesn't hit me often, and when he doesn't, he treats me well. My colleagues, outraged, said, you're being manipulated by him. The righteous colleague immediately pulled out her phone, threatening to call the police. These two shameless people. I'm calling the cops to have them arrested. I lay on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, until the police arrived and took the two culprits from the bed away. After questioning, the police discovered that they had been engaging in prostitution, though with the same person repeatedly. 5, 6, even 8 times a month, leading to emotional involvement. Zhang Jian was detained for 10 days. When he saw me, he tried to attack me, screaming that I was a lowlife, accusing me of plotting against him. I simply handed the police the video evidence of his previous assault, requesting they address the domestic violence charges as well. I went to my mother-in-law's house to bring Xiao Yu home. At this point, she had no idea that Zhang Jian was in custody. All she knew was that I had given her 2 yuan that morning, asking her to take Xiao Yu to the amusement park and buy herself a new outfit. She smiled, delighted by my newfound generosity. But when she finally realized something was wrong, I had already moved into a newly rented apartment with Xiao Yu. She called incessantly, demanding to know where I had taken Zhang Jian. I sent her the video of Zhang Jian's infidelity, explaining that her son was being held for both prostitution and domestic abuse. Then I blocked her number and deleted all contact information. News of Zhang Jian's repeated involvement in prostitution and domestic violence quickly spread throughout the workplace. I became the subject of much sympathy. It was a perfect time to file for divorce, which I did. After being released, Zhang Jian received a dismissal notice from his job and a court summons. The day before the trial, Both Zhang Jian and my mother-in-law ambushed me at the entrance of my workplace. My mother-in-law threw herself on the ground, crying and wailing, "You heartless woman, my son just had a little misstep. And now you want a divorce? You've lived off him all these years. And now you want half the assets? Is there no justice left in the world?" Zhang Jian, wearing a crumpled shirt, his face gaunt, had none of his former charm. "Zhang Lai, can't we stop this madness? If not for me, at least think of Xiao Yu. Do you really want her to grow up in a broken family?" I stepped back, maintaining my distance, and calmly responded, "Regardless of how long I've been a housewife, could Zhang Jian have succeeded in his career without me? Do you think the laundry washed itself? Your perfectly pressed shirts and suits, do you think they happened by magic? Behind your polished exterior, I carried the burden, and now, you've cheated, you've been abusive, and you expect me not to demand my fair share of assets? As for Xiao Yu, it doesn't matter if we divorce or not, you never had time for her anyway." By now, Zhang Jian's affairs and history of domestic abuse were common knowledge, and a crowd began to gather, whispering, "What's going on here? Don't you know? He used to work over there. Looked so put together, but got caught for soliciting prostitution. And apparently, he's been abusing his wife. Unbelievable, how can someone be so shameless? Being a housewife doesn't mean nothing. Without her, could he have focused on his career like that?" With the whispers growing louder, Zhang Jian, embarrassed, dragged his mother away. The day of the trial arrived. The court ruled in my favor, granting me a divorce from Zhang Jian. The marital assets were split evenly. I was awarded custody of Xiao Yu, and Zhang Jian was ordered to pay 1 yuan per month in child support. The court also ruled that Zhang Jian owed me 50 yuan for my years of housework. Upon hearing the decision, Zhang Jian lost it. "Are you serious? Splitting the assets is one thing. But why'd I owe her 50 yuan? I calmly pulled out my phone, showing him the relevant sections of the civil code and explaining the legal framework. The law is fair and just. And this time, I used it as a weapon to defend my rightful claims. Eventually, Zhang Jian sold our house, which had initially been valued at 800 yuan. After accounting for the mortgage and appreciating the property's value, I received my share, 500.000 yuan. While handling the transfer, Zhang Jian asked me, "Zhang Lai, if I hadn't wronged you, do you think we would have ended up here?" I answered softly, "No, because deep down, you never truly respected me. You thought that because I didn't have a job, didn't have an income, that I had no choice but to depend on you. You and your mother always thought you were helping me by watching over Xiao Yu. But Xiao Yu is our child too, isn't she? And as for our son, he left us before he could even open his eyes. But you were already listening to your mother's advice to find someone else to bear a son." Zhang Jian was silent for a moment, then mumbled, "I'm sorry." Not long after, he transferred the money to my account, more than I was legally entitled to. I used that money to buy a small 2-bedroom apartment, decorating it with Xiao Yu's and my favorite things. And we moved in together. One day, Xiao Yu asked, "Mom, will I never live with Dad again?" "Why do you ask, sweetheart? Do you miss him?" "No, I know Dad did something wrong. My teacher said boys shouldn't bully girls. And Dad bullied you. I don't like him." I held Xiao Yu tightly. "Darling, you will always be Mommy and Daddy's precious child. No matter what mistakes Daddy made. He loves you very much. And that will never change." Xiao Yu nodded solemnly. After losing his job, Zhang Jian eventually found another one. Despite his mother's constant crying, he took her back to the countryside, where she became so bitter that even the neighbors shunned her. Zhang Jian increased his child support payments by 2.000 yuan each month, sending the money promptly to my account. On his weekly visits, Zhang Jian always took Xiao Yu to her favorite amusement park. She enjoyed her time with him, and our separation didn't seem to affect her at all, which brought me peace. After all, it wasn't fair for children to bear the burdens of their parents' mistakes. Since the divorce, I've been living a busy and fulfilling life. In my free time, I work out, learn makeup, travel, and explore the world with Xiao Yu. Every time Zhang Jian comes to pick her up, his gaze lingers on me longer, filled with surprise. Not long after, Xiao Yu graduated from kindergarten, and the school organized a graduation ceremony, asking both parents to attend. Watching our tiny daughter perform on stage, both Zhang Jian and I were moved to tears. To celebrate her graduation, Zhang Jian reserved dinner at a fancy restaurant. I intended to decline, But Xiao Yu was so excited that I didn't want to spoil her mood. So I agreed. The restaurant was elegant, and the atmosphere was pleasant. Zhang Jian ordered all the dishes Xiao Yu and I liked. Halfway through the meal, Zhang Jian unexpectedly stood up, dropped to one knee in front of me, and presented a diamond ring. Zhang Lai, I was a terrible person before. I've made so many mistakes. But I've changed now. Please give me another chance. Will you marry me again? His eyes were filled with tears, and his sincerity was almost impossible to resist. The people around us, oblivious to our history, began cheering, "Say yes, say yes." Over the years, I had witnessed Zhang Jian's transformation, and I had felt his efforts to care for both Xiao Yu and me. But still, I resolutely refused. I told him that some mistakes could never be undone, and I could not forgive him. Not even for Xiao Yu's sake. People shouldn't stumble in the same place twice. And I had tasted enough of marriage. From now on, I wanted to live for myself. To live as Zhang Lai.